had a late start this morning for several reasons. One, I didn't record yesterday, and normally I'll record like on a Saturday or even earlier in the week, but this week has just been wild. So, excuse me for that. Also, as you can see, if you're watching this on YouTube, my headset or my headphones, um, they broke. There's that. And so I had to figure this out. So it's weird for me to not have my headphones on, but got to get a new set of headphones. So it was like one thing after the other. So I'm still showing up. I'm still here. I just didn't want y'all to think there was no episode this week, but there is. And so we are going to keep moving along. And so with that being said, like I said, welcome to the Eat to Me podcast. This is Alicia and happy Pride. It is June 1st. I'm so excited that we are celebrating Pride. We are back here at June is it seems like we were just here. Time and space is so wild for me right now. I don't know if you feel that way, but I feel like either it's things are going by at rapid pace or it's not going fast enough. Either way, for me, it feels like we just celebrated Pride, which we had a great time last year, and I'm excited to celebrate this year with y'all as well. And normally I'll have guests on for Pride, but this year in general, I just really wanted to just be more in the forefront of this podcast and talk more as myself. And I have guests in here and there, but it's nice just doing my thing. So it's really fun. So like I said, happy Pride, y'all. And I really wanted to just, talk to you guys about gay pride in general. Um, and for me, it's been a thing for a long time. Like I moved here in New York City. I moved to New York City in 1998, and I got introduced to the quote unquote gay scene, right? Pretty early on. And when I, was able to go out when I wasn't terrified of the city because initially I didn't leave my apartment, y'all. Like once the sun set, I was in. I was like, I'm not going out there. And my roommate or one of my roommates was like, listen, we're in college. We moved to New York because we were excited about this place. What are you doing? So let's get out. Let's do our thing and let's just have fun. It's New York and we're 19, 20 years old. Like, what are we doing here? This is well before, IDs were a big thing. You didn't hear that from me, but back then you could get into places and ID wasn't even thought about. Like you just got in. I'm not saying every establishment, but a lot of the establishments. But I digress. Anyway, so yeah, got out there and was introduced to a world that was just amazing to me and magical and freeing and empowering in a way that I had never experienced before in my life. And so once I was experiencing that, I was like, oh my gosh, like these are my people. This is where I'm meant to be. Like, oh my gosh, I've been looking for this, and here it is right before my eyes. And so the gay scene in the 90s here in New York City was wild, to say the least. And on top of that, talking to so many people who that were older than me, a lot of the elders that were still, in these scenes, talking to them and hearing their stories. And it was just like, wow, this is such an interesting time to be in because we were at a time, or at least I was at a time where I was meeting those pioneers of uh like the Stonewall riots and just the different protests that were happening during the 60s and 70s that they were a little bit older, but they were still in the place to just tell us those stories and just empower us to keep going and to not allow others to stop us and living our authentic self. So it was just a magical time for me. And I will always treasure being around the Stormies, and, people that like her, in particular, Stormy Duvalier. If you guys don't know about her, you should look her up. I actually did a podcast episode about her. I think it was like 2 years ago where I talked about just her story as a she worked as a drag king years and years ago. Was the first drag king. I believe it was in the 50s. Don't quote me, guys, but I wrote it down here somewhere. The point of it is she was a huge um pioneer in this movement and just really exposing us all to the world of drag and how it looked from a female perspective, being um, a more, I'm not blanking on words this morning, but just being um, just the type of person that uh, you wouldn't see in a normal, like not normal, but in a day to day situation as a traditional female. Words are just slipping my mind, y'all, so forgive me at this point. But, it's just been an amazing experience, like I said, being surrounded by people like that and also living in my truth and just growing and learning, especially just being someone who came from Indiana who had no idea but knew there was something more beyond, those walls of Evansville, Indiana. And so as I continue to like go on this journey of just learning myself as a gay woman, or a queer woman, however you want to, label it, whatever, I wanted to learn more about, and this was years ago. I wanted to learn more about like Stonewall and the rioting and uh, what all happened during that time, right? How did all these things come about? And what I found out and what I was told, you know, by these people, particularly Stormy, was that these riots began by way of Black and Brown people here in New York City, and even things that took place in San Francisco, prior to Stonewall. There were different things that were happening in LA. There was the Cooper Donuts uprising in 1959. And just different organizations that organized things outside of New York City. There was the let me look up that it was the Committee for Homosexual Freedom. There was the Third World Gay Revolution, and these different organizations outside of New York also, like I said, within that San Francisco area, they also were coming together to fight for the rights of the LGBTQ community and, say like enough is enough. Enough of this, treating us less than and making quote unquote an example of us by, demeaning us and trying to erase us out of society. And it's not worked, and as we see even now in 2025, there's still these quote unquote tactics of trying to erase us, and it's like the same song and dance, but the results will be the same. You will not get rid of the LGBTQ community. You just won't. Um, because as long as there's life being given on this planet, there's going to be an LGBTQ plus person born within this society. So it's like I don't understand it. Like I truly don't understand it. And it's wild that I'll say, I grew up, in a very religious, with a very religious background, and I would hear the things spoken in the church about being gay, about it being a sin, and really wrestling with that as a young person, trying to understand, am I, you know, um, am I as quote unquote sinner? Am I doing things wrong? Like, I'm not I'm just discovering who I am, and I know that who I am, is not like everything. Like my whole me being a queer woman is not my whole identity. I know it's a part of who I am. I know that's who I'm attracted to. I'm attracted to women, but to say that that's everything about me, it's wild because I don't think about that every minute of the day. Like I have other things about myself that also encompass who I am, but when you're put in a position to think and feel a certain way, right? Sometimes it feels like that thing is the only thing that you can identify with because people deem that as the only thing that you are. And so it took me a long time to really like get to a point where I was okay with just accepting, not just with accepting the fact that people, not all people, but some people are just going to be ignorant in that way. And I just have to live in my truth and be myself and know that no matter what, there are people out here that love and support me and that um, are not looking at just me being a queer woman, lesbian woman, um, and that's just it. Like I said, there's so much more to being a person. Like I don't know that heterosexual people are walking around like, oh, I'm heterosexual, and that's my only identity. And people can argue that. I know instantly be like, well, why do gay people do all these things? Well, it's the same. It's not the same, but it's similar to the idea of being a black person in this country. You're being marginalized in some way, and you have to let people know, like, listen, yes, this is a part of who I am, but and at the same time, I'm acknowledging the fact that there are so many people in this world, it's not just this country, in this world, that want to erase me, that want me out of the out of this whole narrative. And it's like, no, that's not gonna happen. So I have to remind you that yes, this is a part of who I am, and no, you're not gonna get rid of me because of this part of who I am. Because when I think of all the parts of me, I'm like I said, I'm a lesbian queer woman. I'm black. Like I said, I'm a woman, right? I'm a nurse practitioner. I'm a performer. I'm a podcaster. I have a coaching program. Like, there's so many things about me that are not just labeled in one thing. And I think that's another thing too. We have to really be thinking about when we're thinking about humans in general. Like there's so much to us. It's not just a one thing that makes us who we are, um, which is even more beautiful when I think about celebrating Pride because so many people will instantly want to make it this, one-sided thing. Like it's just about these people, wanting to be these lustful individuals that are out here doing, wild and crazy things. And is that a part of the process? Possibly for some people. I'm not judging anybody for how they celebrate, who they are in themselves and how they live their lives. I, for one, I go, I mean, when I was younger, I would hang out and do all the things. But now, if it's a daytime event, great, I'll be there. I can maybe give you until about 8 o'clock p.m. And then after that, I gotta go home. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, what people may think is happening in the everyday LGBTQ experience is probably something fabricated or exaggerated by way of what media has demonized us into looking like. But for the average person, especially people my age, and older, and maybe some a little bit younger than me, we're not out here, hanging from chandeliers and being wild and like, what I'm saying? Like we have fun, we enjoy our lives or whatever, but it's like any other person that's celebrating something that's a part of who they are. So I just wanted to say that because I just feel like in so many ways, there have been so many narratives that have been put out there. And I'm happy to say that a lot of people are waking up to the fact that a lot of this propaganda is not true. And it's literally what it is, propaganda, something just to keep us divided as people. And I just think it's ridiculous at this point, 2025, guys. We are in 2025. And when we think about the trajectory of really the forefront of when all these things were happening in the 50s and 60s and into the 70s as it relates to gay liberation, it just boggles my mind that we are still at a place where we're still fighting for the visibility of not only just the LGBTQ community as a whole, but just even trans people. And it weighs heavy on my heart because, you know, being in this New York scene in the 90s and, at one point I was, doing makeup with some of the queens here early on. That's how I learned how to do makeup was with the queens here at that and I'm aging myself with this one because this place is not even around, but uh, it was called The Tunnel, and the tunnel was also by way of so it was a tunnel and the curfew. It was two different clubs in one space, and there we would just have a ball. And yes, but there's a lot of wild things happening there. But I learned so much from those queens and empowered me in ways that I would have never been able to be as bold as I am now and stand up and say what I want to say, um, and just live authentically. A lot of them, they knew, they were living a risky life. And this was in the 90s, right? Like when we thought, right? We thought things were getting better, but finding out, we knew queens that had lost their lives to violence, um, people, just out to get them for just them being themselves. And it was just a really, really crazy time. And so to think about then and now, considering what's going on now in this world, it's like, when does this end? When do we get to a point where we recognize that trans people are just that? They're people, they're human beings. Um, I think even down to when we label people from birth. Listen, it's exciting to know, the gender of your baby when you are pregnant. It is. It's exciting, and just to sit here and acknowledge that it's not. I mean, that's ridiculous to say because people get really excited, um, and people have expectations, right? And that's just a human experience. You expect certain things from your child. Um, from birth up until God knows how long, right? You have some people have like an actual vision for their child, what they think their child should do, how they should be, this, that, and the other. And a lot of times that is not always the case. A lot of times we find that that person that we gave birth to or that we raised and we brought into this world has a whole different way of living and being and doing things. And it's not a right or wrong, right? Particularly when it comes to being trans. It's just who they are, right? It's just who they are. And I'm getting emotional because it's just like I'm not trans, but I am a queer lesbian woman. And I know what that feels like when people are trying to make you something that fits their narrative. And you're telling them, that's not me. That's not me. And you feel crazy sometimes because it's like you want to conform. There are times when you want to just conform because it's easier. It's like we just do what they're saying and fit in because it's easier to do that than to go against the grain. And listen, I have some friends that going against the grain is just who they are, and they're not going to pretend and do whatever. But for a lot of us that had that feeling of, oh my gosh, if I don't conform, will I be accepted? Will I be loved? Will I even have a place to stay? Right? My family disowned me in a way of like me losing housing. Do I just conform and just be what they want me to be? It's hard. And to the people that have, raised these children who are struggling with the idea of, you know, every plan that they had in place is not going as planned, you know, there's some grace there for them as well. Because it's like, okay, I love you. Well, the ones that are with good intentions, let's just be clear, right? Because not everybody has good intentions. It is what it is. And you just have to know that, right? But for those that really love their children and and are struggling with, the transition of understanding who this person is, that is trans, that is gay, that is lesbian or whatever, you know, I offer grace to the ones that want to truly support but still need help because they're struggling with the idea that the person that they thought was going to be this, maybe boy that's going to play sports or girl that was going to be whatever, like the different cookie cutter narratives that we've put in place in society when we our worlds are rocked because we think that's just the norm, you know like I said, giving grace to those who are willing to go through this process and journey and want to learn. I provide grace because I understand that it takes time. It's a shift in how you think, what you've been taught, right? Particularly those of us who were in the church, right? And who have been told that certain things are a sin, that this is not natural. Um, we're going to quote unquote hell because we have gone against what folks have been told is biblical gospel. um so like I said, grace is definitely there for me in that way, and I can't speak for every person in the LGBTQ community, but that's just me. But for those who are just downright evil and those who are here to cause more harm and angst and things of that nature, I don't wish anything bad on you, but I wish you away. And that's just that. Seriously. But as I have gone on this whole tangent of that, I also wanted to just talk about in this conversation the the whitewashing of pride and how um what we see now in the celebrations of pride and every June when we, are exposed to some big corporations marketing campaign on pride, um, it gives me a little like weird heebie-jeebies. I'm not gonna lie, and I say that because in many ways, gay pride, and the riots that were actually started by way of the liberation of gay liberation. It was never meant to be this, you know, Disney World based um celebration, commercialized, um, thing that we now see. And it's nice to come together and celebrate how happy and, you know, proud we are to be who we are. But we can't, or we shouldn't, should say, we shouldn't dismiss the fact that these the reason why we celebrate today is because of um, the discrimination and the mistreatment of the LGBTQ community from years prior. And I feel like in many cases, when you do go to Pride here in New York City, in Manhattan in particular, it's very whitewashed. And I remember last year when we were at the parade, and I was so disgusted. And my wife was like, "What is wrong?" And I was like, "This is so fake. There's nothing genuine about this at all." Um, and I just was so sad and upset and angry, like all the feels as it relates to that. Like I was just so annoyed because I was looking around and I was just like, I don't see hardly any black or brown people in this parade. I don't see that many queens that are black and brown. And you're probably thinking, well, what's the big deal about that? That's who led these initiatives from the start. That's my problem. And so the erasure of who actually led the riots and who spearheaded these things, it's so frustrating to me because it just speaks to the white supremacy and racism and colonization colonialization. I can't even talk, girl. Mentality that we see here in this country. Um, and some people might think, well, this happens also in the LGBTQ community. Yes, it does. White supremacy does not stop just at the heterosexual experience. It's so embedded in what the society looks like, and that it just transcends, like I said, beyond what we would think it would be at, but it is what it is. And so what I want to do this pride for the podcast is talk about the Black experience um in the LGBTQ community. I may have, I guess, I don't know. I'm still trying to teeter with that, but I just want to talk about the experience of being Black and gay. Um, because it's just a completely different experience. And as much as I wanted when I was younger to have this, true, like rainbow experience of everyone coming together as, not being race based, I realized over time how different our experiences were. And seeing the divide um, within the LGBTQ community as it related to race. And so my hope is to uplift the Black queer person, the LGBTQ person this month. Let let myself know that we are seen, that we are um, game changers in ways that sometimes we're not acknowledged, but we spearhead the majority of the things that happen as it relates to societal norms and even within the LGBTQ community as well. So I was going to go down this whole rabbit hole going through all the histories, but I think it's slowly throughout this month, I will do just that and just really start breaking down um, what this looks like. Because it's one thing to just like, oh, we're out here, we're celebrating Pride, last Sunday here. In the month, and they have different events throughout the month. Um, but just really understanding where all this came from. 'Cause I think a lot of people have either dismissed or want to erase or just even not even acknowledging the fact that this all started with Black and brown people um, raising their voices and saying enough is enough. Um, so yeah, I want to, like I said, acknowledge that, share that knowledge with my community, and just let you know that the Black and Brown experience um, doesn't just end with like civil rights and things of that nature. It goes it goes beyond, right? It's just so vast in that way, and so celebrating Pride this month by recognizing my people. I love you guys. And, you know, it's long overdue, in my opinion. So happy Pride again. And listen, if you have any questions or if you have any suggestions, I am open to what you may want to hear this month as it relates to Pride and celebrating the Black community um, because it's essential. And I'll sprinkle in some Juneteenth stuff too this month because obviously we have to celebrate that too. So I'm excited. I'm excited for June and what it brings. And yeah, uh, like I always say, let's just keep on keeping on. And y'all, listen, thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Enemy Podcast. Once again, happy Pride, celebrating the Black LGBTQ community. Yeah, and I'll see y'all next week. Love you. Bye.